So I'm really pleased to engage in this conversation. Sadly, it's not in person, it's over the internet, but we're also glad that we can still do that. So, Dieulita, you tell us where you live and what your connection has been to Hillhurst thus far.
Absolute, absolutely. So I live in Lacombe, Treaty 6 territory, and I am a fan of Hillhurst, I guess. So I've watched a lot of your videos through COVID online, but prior to that, I've attended a few events at Hillhurst for
Yeah.
a firm and other events. So I'm a fan of Hillhurst.
Oh, thank you. I'm a bit of a fan of you and your work where you are. I know that when there was a Black Lives Matter march, and it was in Innisfail, wasn't it? You,
Yes.
you were one of the spearheaders of that. How did that go, and what was that like?
It was like walking into the lion's den, but I was optimistic. A lot of people showed up with me, and the community was very welcoming, I must admit. And it was the moment that I knew that I had a little fighting spirit in me. And so I went, I took the challenge, and I got up and I spoke, and I survived, I guess. So it was a very learning experience, but an amazing one that I wouldn't trade.
Excellent. I'm so glad. And I've been part of a few of the protest rallies when they were in our city, and I really think that is where we're at right now. That's where we take our values, our beliefs, and we take them to the streets and say this matters to us. So every little bit takes a lot of courage, and you've got lots. And I'm really glad you were helped organize that, and I hope you know you were supported by many people when you did that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to hear.
I I had an email from Keith who told me a bit about Emancipation Day, and I had to talk to you yesterday to help me understand a bit. And then I've done a little bit because the only piece that came to mind was the Bob Marley song, I have, which I have since listened to and read. But tell us about what Emancipation Day is and how it fits in your life and context.
Absolutely. So Emancipation Day is celebrated the first August of every year. And usually, if it falls during the weekend, it's celebrated the first Monday. Um, and what it does is it reminds us of the proclamation that came out from the British Empire. Sorry, from the British Crown, I guess, to the Empire, to put an official end to the slave trade within the British Empire. And so it's a day where people, especially older people in the community, would gather and remember and talk and celebrate about overcoming slavery and surviving and being able to be together in community. So, having grown up in the Bahamas, August Monday was a very big day for me, even though I am Haitian, but it was just knowing that we overcame such a huge thing has always been, it has always played a special role in my life. And so this year, I thought it was especially, it was something that needed to be celebrated even more. So that's what August Monday means to me.
You call it August Monday?
Yes, we call it August Monday.
August
Yeah,
Monday,
but it's
okay.
Emancipation Day.
What's your memory as a younger person for that day as a kid? Do you remember it?
I do. I think it was, for me, it was about the food and the festivals,
Good.
right? Because everything is better with food, and being able to be in community with the older people of our community. And so it was to take time away and remember that we were descendants of African people and that we overcame so much. But the food stood out to me because they would cook a lot of the food that was similar to what the enslaved people had then. And so it was things that we I didn't have throughout the year. So that was my fondest memory, was the food.
Ah, okay. Um, what's your, I'm 60, 30 years ago when I was, 35 years ago when I was in seminary, I was introduced to black theology. I was introduced to feminist theology, liberation theology, creation theology. And but just today, I signed up for a course that's starting in August on it's called I Can't Breathe, and it's by an American theologian on black theology that's resurfacing again. When you think about black theology and what you may or may not be as familiar about it, what is the church called to, in your opinion?
That's an amazing question because it's one that I've struggled with, because Christianity has not always been the beacon of hope to Black people. And so there's this love relationship there. Because a lot of what we were taught in regards to Christianity came from a European centric thinking or thoughts. So a lot of the songs were very European based. They were written by European writers. The interpretation of scripture was usually done through European lens. However, being the resilient people that we are, you had in my day, they called it the old Negro spirituals. Now, some of them are called African American spirituals, but I call them Negro spirituals. And those songs are what resonated to me most, because those are the songs that spoke to me. Those were the songs that I was able to sing, even though I'm not a singer. So, and Black theology always resonated with me most because the speakers then were able to speak how we spoke. We didn't have to speak the Queen's English. So I remember speakers would come in and would tell stories and reimagine certain biblical stories, and that's what I loved. I didn't like the ones that were in the Queen's English, from the lens of a European, but I enjoyed Black theology, and it's something that has kept me in the church. And it has been Black theology that has pushed for a lot of the liberation and pushed for a lot of the changes when it comes to um, Black lives, and Black issues and race issues. So Black theology is important, especially the songs.
Right. Well, I'm sadly, in one way, but in another way, really excited that we're going to dive into this more fully and more deeply, because I think that there's always been the temptation to go with wherever the politically correct thing is. And this
Yeah.
is not just a blip. It's like the COVID is not just a snowstorm. It's an epic change is happening
Yes.
with the church, with our education, with the seniors, with people of color, all of these things. I think we're in a place of really an opportunity to reimagine and really get it right. I'm very hopeful about that, actually. Um, and I also am really aware that it's each of our work to do, and to do that work and that reading and that understanding and the conversations around that, um, because I think it's so important for all of us. Um, when you think about George Floyd's death, which was a pinnacle moment that caught our with uh, with deep grief, caught our awareness and imagination. What's your sense of what's going on right now, and what do we need to pay attention to?
Every time I hear the name of George Floyd, I get emotional. Just because he represents so many before him,
Yes.
and so many who will come after him, and and so it's always hard for me. I have to take a moment at times to speak about it, because I said, he looks like my father, he looks like my brother, he looks like my cousins, he looks like my uncles, and watching his video, watching not his video, watching the video where he was murdered, I always picture those loved ones, my loved ones. And the fact that there have been others who have been killed, murdered in similar fashions at the hands of the police is always, it always takes us back again. Um, and especially with the Christian church, I think we need to be mindful of our brothers and sisters. So these subjects may be political, they may be controversial, but so was Jesus. And you
Yes,
can't be a Christian without being controversial. You can't be a Christian without being political. So I want people to remember that it's not causing, it's not calling to stir up trouble, to say, to call for action when it comes to justice for people who have been murdered, or to call for justice when it comes to systemic racism or misogyny or any of those things. Like, it's literally what we're called to do. We're called to overturn the tables. We're called to be angry, be upset, but also be the change. And so I think that's what we're supposed to do. I hope I'm getting it right. I hope I'm right. And that if Jesus was here today, he would be standing beside me, or he would be having this conversation that we're having now. And so that's what I would like to remind people of. As Christian, it's your duty to be a part of this conversation always and every day.
I agree. I mean, I've loved some of the memes that I've seen and the comments that have come as an example. You know that there's no white people in the Bible, as an example, and just our whole overturning. I mean, and you're absolutely 100% right. I mean, the death of Jesus was a political event, and I think we have to say that politics and religion and science, all of these pieces matter, but to be clear that an act of faith means that we look with both eyes to the reality of the political situation and the politics that Jesus challenged, as well as
Yep.
patriarchy. He challenged patriarchy, he challenged the priestly system, all of those things. And that actually is not something to fear. It actually will make our faith come more alive.
Yep.
And I'm excited about that. Um, so on this Emancipation Day, what will your house be like? What will your tradition be, or have you thought about it yet?
Um, that's a good question. I'm not. My family isn't here with me, but I usually find community. So it means traveling to Edmonton or Calgary. Um, and being with people there who will stuff me with food and who will send me back with Tupperware containers filled with food. But because of COVID, it's different this year. So I think I will spend time in solitude and reflection with a chosen few who I'm able to isolate myself with, cohort with,